The air in Hollow Ridge, Tennessee, always carried a faint chill, even in the dead of summer. It wasn't the kind of cold you could shake off with a jacket or a cup of coffee. It was deeper, like the wind itself had fingers that reached inside your bones and squeezed. Most folks in town chalked it up to the mountains. The 20. They said the ridge got its name from the way the wind howled through the valleys. But Jacob Tanner knew better. He'd grown up hearing the old stories whispers about something ancient living under the soil, something that didn't take kindly to outsiders poking around where they didn't belong. His grandmother used to say the land remembered, and it didn't forgive. Jacob was 32, a wiry man with a mop of dark hair and a face that looked like it had seen too many late nights and not enough good news. He'd moved back to Hollow Ridge 6 months ago after his life in Nashville fell apart, lost his job at the auto shop, lost his apartment, lost his girlfriend to some slick guy with a pickup truck and a better smile. Hollow Ridge was supposed to be a fresh start. His uncle had left him a crumbling cabin on the edge of town, a place so old the wood creaked like it was groaning under the weight of its own history. Jacob figured he could fix it up, maybe sell it, make enough to get out of Tennessee for good. That was the plan anyway. The cabin sat on a plot of land that backed up to the ridge itself, a jagged spine of rock and pine that loomed over the town like a sleeping giant. The first night he spent there, Jacob woke up to a sound he couldn't place. It wasn't the wind, though it came with a low, guttural hum that seemed to rise from the ground itself, vibrating through the floorboards and into his chest. He told himself it was just the house settling, or maybe a bear rooting around outside. But the next night, it came again, louder. And this time he swore he heard something else woven into it, a voice, faint and garbled, like someone shouting underwater. By the third night, he'd had enough. He grabbed his flashlight and a hunting knife his uncle had left behind, figuring he'd prove to himself it was nothing. The beam cut through the darkness as he stepped outside, the air thick with the smell of pine and damp earth. The hum was stronger out here, pulsing like a heartbeat under his boots. He followed it, past the sagging porch, past the overgrown yard, until he reached the base of the ridge. The sound seemed to pour from a crack in the rock, a narrow fissure, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Jacob hesitated, his breath fogging in the cold, then muttered, "Screw it," and slipped inside. The passage was tight, the walls slick with moss, and something darker streaks of black that glistened like oil. The hum grew louder, thrumming in his skull, and the air turned heavy, pressing against his lungs. He pushed deeper, the flashlight flickering, as if it didn't want to be there any more than he did. After what felt like hours, but couldn't have been more than 10 minutes, the tunnel opened into a chamber. The walls were smooth, unnaturally so, like they'd been carved by something with patience and time to spare. In the center was a pit, maybe 10 feet across, its edges jagged and worn. The hum was deafening now, a roar that made his teeth ache, and it was coming from that hole. Jacob edged closer, his boots crunching on loose gravel. He aimed the flashlight down, expecting to see water or maybe a pile of animal bones, something normal. Instead, the beam vanished into nothing. No bottom, no walls, just a void that swallowed the light whole. And then, from that void, something looked back. He didn't see it at first, not with his eyes. It was a feeling, a prickle on his neck that turned into a cold sweat down his spine. Then the hum shifted, twisting into words he couldn't understand but felt in his gut. Asterisk, you shouldn't be here. The voice wasn't loud, but it filled the chamber, seeping into the stone, into him. Jacob stumbled back, his flashlight slipping from his hand. It hit the edge of the pit and tumbled in, the light spiraling down until it was gone. Darkness rushed in, and with it came the sound of movement, slow, deliberate, like something heavy dragging itself up. He ran. The tunnel seemed longer going back, the walls tighter, scraping his arms as he clawed his way out. When he finally burst into the night air, he didn't stop, kept running until he was back in the cabin, slamming the door and shoving a chair under the knob. His heart hammered so hard he thought it'd break his ribs, but the hum was gone. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating, and for a moment he wondered if he'd imagined it. Then he saw the knife. He dropped it in the chamber. He was sure of it, but there it was, sitting on the kitchen table, blade gleaming under the dim bulb like it had been polished. Jacob didn't sleep that night. He sat on the couch, staring at the knife, trying to convince himself it was a trick of the mind. He'd been drinking too much late. Maybe the bourbon had finally caught up with him. By morning, he'd half convinced himself it was a nightmare, a one-off fluke. He decided to stay out of the woods, fix up the cabin, and get the hell out of Hollow Ridge. Simple, but the land had other plans. Over the next week, things got weird. Not loud weird, not jump out of the closet weird, but the kind of quiet strangeness that creeps up on you. The first sign was the water. Jacob turned on the faucet one morning, and what came out wasn't clear. It was murky, flecked with black specks that swirled like ink. He shut it off, figuring the well needed cleaning. But when he checked the tank, it was fine, crystal clear. He tried the tap again, and this time it ran red thick, coppery smelling, like blood. He gagged, stumbling back, and when he looked again, it was normal. Just water. Then there were the shadows. He'd catch them out of the corner of his eye shapes, moving along the walls, too tall and thin to be human. Gone when he turned to look. At first, he blamed the light, the way it flickered through the pines outside. But one night, he woke to a silhouette standing in his bedroom doorway, motionless, featureless, just a black cutout against the hall. He blinked, and it was gone, but the air felt wrong after that, heavy and watchful. The noises came next. Scratching, faint at first, like branches on the roof. But it wasn't windy, and when he checked, there was nothing, no trees close enough, no marks on the shingles. The sound moved under the floorboards one night, behind the walls the next, always stopping when he got close. He started sleeping with the hunting knife under his pillow, though he wasn't sure what good it'd do. By the end of the week, Jacob was a wreck, bags under his eyes, hands shaky from too much coffee and not enough sleep. He decided to call his buddy Mike from Nashville, a mechanic with a level head who'd tell him he was losing it and snap him out of this spiral. The phone rang twice before Mike picked up. "Yo, Jake, what's up? You still alive out there?" "Barely," Jacob said, forcing a laugh that didn't land. "Man, I need you to tell me I'm crazy. This place, it's messing with me." He spilled it all. The hum, the pit, the voice, the water, the shadows, the knife. Mike listened, quiet at first, then let out a low whistle. "Sounds like you got a ghost, bro. Or maybe the cabin's haunted. You checked the history?" "History? Yeah. Like who lived there before your uncle? Old places like that, they've got stories. Bet you $10 something messed up went down." Jacob hadn't thought of that. His uncle had been a recluse, barely talked about the Cabinjas that had been in the family forever. Maybe. I don't know where to start. Library, dude. Hollow Ridge has one, right? Or ask around. Small towns, people talk. It was a solid idea. Jacob thanked him, hung up, and grabbed his keys. If he was going to figure this out, he needed answers, something concrete to prove he wasn't cracking up. The Hollow Ridge Public Library was a squat brick building on Main Street, its windows cloudy with age. Inside, it smelled like mildew and old paper, the kind of place that hadn't seen a new book since the 90s. The librarian, a wiry woman named Agnes with glasses perched on her nose, glanced up from her desk as Jacob walked in. "Help you?" she asked, her voice sharp, like she didn't trust strangers. Yeah." Jacob said, scratching the back of his neck. "I'm looking for anything on the old Tanner place out by the ridge. Family history, maybe?" Agnes's eyes narrowed, just for a second. Then she nodded. "Tanner, huh? That's a name I haven't heard in a while. Wait here." She disappeared into the stacks, returning with a cardboard box labeled "Local Records, Unprocessed." She dropped it on the table with a thud. "This ain't organized, but it's what we've got. Newspapers, deeds, some old letters. Tanners go back a ways around here. Good luck." Jacob thanked her and dug in. The box was a mess-yellowed clippings, handwritten notes, a few faded photos. He started with the deeds, tracing the cabin's ownership. It had been in the Tanner family since 1832, built by a man named Ezekiel Tanner, a settler who'd come west looking for farmland. The papers didn't say much else, so Jacob moved to the newspapers. Most were mundane births, deaths, a drought in 47, but then he found it. A clipping from 1893, brittle and smudged. Asterisk tragedy at Tanner Homestead. Asterisk, the headline read. The article was short, but it hit like a punch. Asterisk. On the night of the 12th of October, the Tanner family, Joseph, Mary, and their 3 children were found dead in their home near Hollow Ridge. Authorities report no signs of struggle or injury, though the bodies were discovered in the cellar, arranged in a circle. Local rumors of strange noises and lights in the woods persist, but Sheriff Daniel Boone dismisses them as superstition. Cause of death remains unknown. Asterisk. Jacob's stomach twisted. The cellar. His cabin didn't have Oni ore, did it? He'd never checked under the floorboards. He kept reading, flipping through more clippings. Another article from 1921 mentioned a disappearance. A Tanner cousin, Amos, who'd been prospecting near the ridge, last seen with a pickaxe heading for a cave he'd found. Never came back. Then, in 1965, a brief note about Jacob's great-uncle, Silas Tanner, reported missing for 3 days before turning up in town, mute and wild-eyed. He wouldn't speak, just pointed at the ridge when asked where he'd been. The deeper Jacob dug, the worse it got. Every few decades, someone tied to that land vanished or deedleways near the ridge, always with gaps in the story. The townsfolk blamed everything from bears to moonshine, but the pattern was there, staring him in the face. And then he found the letters. They were tucked in an envelope, ink faded but legible, written by Ezekiel Tanner himself, dated 1833, a year after he'd built the cabin. Jacob's hands shook as he read. Asterisk. The land is not right. We dug too deep, found a hollow place beneath the ridge, a pit that breathes. At night, it calls to us, a sound like no beast I've known. Mary says it's the devil, but I reckon it's older. We sealed it with stones, but I fear it remembers us. God forgive me, I should have left it be. Asterisk. The second letter, a month later, was shorter. Asterisk. It knows our names. I hear it in my sleep. We cannot leave. The road turns us back. Pray for us. Asterisk. That was it. No more letters, no explanation. Jacob sat there, the box a jumble around him, his mind racing. A pit that breathes. A hollow place. He thought of the chamber, the void, the voice. It wasn't a ghost story, it was worse. Something alive, something that didn't die. Agnes appeared behind him, quiet as a shadow. Find what you needed. Jacob jumped, nearly knocking the box over. Yeah, thanks. You ever hear anything about this? The Tanners? The ridge? Her mouth tightened. Folks talk. Old Tallis say the ridge don't like being disturbed. Say it takes what it's owed. I don't put stock in it, but... She paused, eyeing him. You look like you've seen a ghost. You live out there, don't you? Yeah. he said, voice hoarse. "For now." She nodded, like that explained everything. "Be careful then." Lance got a long memory. Jacob drove back to the cabin in a daze, the letters burning a hole in his pocket. He didn't know what he believed: curses, monsters, some kind of hallucination, but he couldn't stay. Not anymore. He'd pack a bag, crash with Mike in Nashville, figure out the rest later. The sun was dipping below the ridge as he pulled up, casting long shadows across the yard. The air felt wrong again, too still, like it was holding its breath. Inside, the cabin was dark. He flicked the light switch, nothing. Power was out. Perfect. He grabbed his flashlight from the counter, cursing under his breath, and started throwing clothes into a duffel bag. That's when he heard it. The hum. Low at first, barely there, but growing, seeping through the walls. His blood went cold. "No," he muttered. "Not again." He snatched the knife from the table, still there, still gleaming, and headed for the door. But the hum turned into a rumble, shaking the floor, and then a new sound. A crack, sharp and splintering. It came from below. Jacob froze, staring at the floorboards. Dust sifted through the cracks, and the wood bowed, like something was pushing from underneath. He bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The knob turned, but the frame held fast, like the house itself wouldn't let him go. The rumbling grew, the floor groaning, and then it split. A jagged line tore through the boards, widening as something black and slick oozed up, not water, not mud, but alive, pulsing like a heartbeat. Jacob stumbled back, the flashlight beam catching at tendrils, thin and writhing, tipped with barbs that glistened wetly. "Stay back!" he yelled, slashing with the knife. The blade cut through one, and it recoiled, his singa sound like steam escaping a pipe, but more came. Faster, curling toward him. He swung again, backing toward the window. But the tendrils were smarter than that. They split, flanking him, and one lashed out, wrapping his ankle. It yanked hard, and he hit the floor, the knife skittering away. The thing dragged him toward the hole, the wood splintering wider. He clawed at the boards, nails splitting, but it was too strong. The hum was a roar now, words pounding in his skull. Asterisk. "You're ours. Always were." Asterisk, he screamed, kicking, but the tendrils tightened, pulling him down into the dark. The last thing he saw was the cabin floor closing above him, sealing shut like it had never broken. When Mike didn't hear from Jacob for a week, he drove out to Hollow Ridge. The cabin was there, quiet and untouched, lights on, truck in the drive, duffel bag half packed on the couch, no sign of Jacob. Mike called the sheriff, who poked around, found nothing unusual, and wrote it off as another runaway. "Small towns lose people sometimes," he said. "Happens." But Mike wasn't convinced. He stayed a night, just to be sure, and that's when he heard it. A hum, faint and low, rising from the ground. He grabbed his keys and left, tires spitting gravel, promising himself he'd never come back. The cabin's still there, if you know where to look. Folks in Hollow Ridge don't talk about it much, say it's cursed. Say the ridge takes what it wants. Sometimes, late at night, you can hear it. A sound like breathing, deep and slow, waiting for the next tanner to come home.